Hello, everybody. My name is Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 MVP, and I'm here today on the European Shipping Forum, brought to you by N&B Solutions and MS Dynamics World. And in this session, we're going to talk about how to strengthen your supply chain to prepare for the next global crisis. So we've got a great panel today. So let's start with our panelists, and we'll first introduce David.
Hi, my name is David Strauss. I'm based out of Frankfurt in Germany, and I'm VP for Strategic Partner and Enterprise Solutions at E2Open, which includes things like integration, collaboration, and other topics which we're going to talk about today.
Okay, David, thank you. Anders.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for having me here. So my name is Anders Dahlin from Sweden. I'm a supply chain specialist within Microsoft Dynamics. I worked in the supply chain space for many years at customers, partners, and recently at Microsoft.
Okay, thank you, Anders. And Chris.
Hi, everyone. Chris Winstanley. I'm Vice President of Solutions Management at N&B. I've been in supply chain software my whole career, which is longer than I'm going to admit to now. And in my role now, I engage with customers, partners, prospects to consult on their shipping and compliance strategies, and then work with the N&B sales and implementation teams to support those requirements.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much. So we'll start our first question. We'll start with you, David. So David, over the last couple of years, organizations went through some tough times with disruption to the global supply chains. What challenges should we be looking for in 2023?
Well, if anything, the last 4 or 5 years for supply chain professionals have shown that it's potentially unpredictable. Black swan, once in a lifetime events are happening on a more than once a year basis. So you got to be ready for that. And by now, the customers and the executives expect you to be resilient, at least somewhat, even if you haven't seen it before. So that's what one should expect as a supply chain professional. And definitely, it's a tough market, right? In terms of capital, workforce, those are definitely some constraints. That there are disruptions in supply of material, of people, and of money, and all of that has an effect for sure. That needs to be managed.
Okay, David, thank you. Anders, what do you think coming up in 2023?
Rick, so I agree with David. The disruptions will continue. We moved a lot of supplies to manage the disruptions. We moved the supplies closer to the customers, more nearshore production closer to the customer sites. But we need to balance that and manage that kind of type of supply chain network. So making sure somehow the challenge of having visibility so we can act in time and execute on our strategy when the disruptions occur, as they will, that will be a huge challenge. So balancing cost and supply with today's macroeconomics.
Okay, thank you. Chris, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think I was going to focus more on just the kind of the disruptions themselves. So as David said, kind of what we know is that they're predictably unpredictable now. So we have kind of geopolitical tensions, kind of issues happening all around us, trade wars, political conflicts that you have to build into your kind of supply chain planning. You've got the cost problems in terms of growing costs, which are going to increase and continue. But then you've got to factor in other things like climate change, which is coming up more and more in conversations, and extreme weather events that have an impact across not just production but transportation as well. Cybersecurity, as we become more digital, as we talk about how we want to have a digital supply chain to go with our physical supply chain, cybersecurity becomes an ongoing risk. And I think we shouldn't lose sight that disruption changes consumer behavior as well. So just as we're dealing with what's happening in our supply chain straight away, if you think about demand for different types of products caused by the pandemic or lockdown, or just the overall growth of e-com, granted those were things that were well on their way. They were happening before the disruptions that we're experiencing now, but they accelerate that rate of change. And if you're not in a position to deal with those, then they just add to the general mess that you find yourself in.
And I think the overall message is companies just need to be more resilient. And I think they've realized that now after what we went through the last few years. And there's a lot more focus today on the supply chain than ever before. So we'll start with you, David, on the next question. How can manufacturers, shippers, and retailers add resilience to their supply chain? Let's talk about C-level executives, supply chain leaders, and around software capabilities.
So from the C-level executive, there's been a welcome influx of supply chain as a topic up at those levels, which definitely was not a given before. I think all manufacturing companies have definitely raised the importance of supply chain because of what's happened in the last years. But it's still, there's a lot of people are still learning because CEOs tend to be maybe more sales focused or more product focused or something like that than something as boring in the old days as supply chain. So, and that's the job then for the supply chain leaders to provide the execs, the companies, with compelling stories, visualizations to go with the visibility, which Anders mentioned, with exception management and actual tangible results. And this is supply chain. And by the way, this is how we're going to make supply chain more resilient. Is a story you tell at the same time to get budgets, to get buy-in, that kind of thing. And the software capabilities then ultimately, which come with that. So we can talk about many things, but when you talk about resilience, when you talk about supply chain, there is a lot of room for investment in better software, in better execution, that kind of thing, right? It's just a lot of stuff is still manual and disconnected, and this system and that system. You can definitely make it more dynamic, to make a pun.
So we got to get rid of a lot of spreadsheets yet, I think.
I know it's a Microsoft call, but I've been at so many supply chain conferences where there were guys on stage, I kid you not, saying, usually, in a strong French answer, Excel is a cancer, right? And getting a round of applause from the audience.
So Anders, what would you like to add?
So from those perspectives, I'd like to add a few things based on what David said. So from a C-level executive's perspective, I mean, it's about having this kind of supply chain network that's very vital today. I mean, we're moving supply closer to customers, more near shore, but we need to balance that. It's always a balance. So we need to build that partnership upstream and downstream in our supply chain. And from a more of a supply chain leaders, we need to make sure to facilitate that we need to share data. So it's really important that supply chain leaders make sure they share data with their partners in the supply chain network to have that kind of transparency for everything to work. So we need to be transparent, we need to have data sharing, and they have to make sure we use automation to manage and act on the disruptions when they occur. So I would say that we need to have that kind of software capabilities to unify the supply chain data, basically. So if it's not connected, if the data is not connected, you will be too slow and it will not work.
Okay, thank you. Chris, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think obviously echoing Anders and David really, but from a C-level, I think they're looking at ensuring that their supply chains can be recession ready, given the economic climate that we find ourselves in. And I guess it's incumbent upon them in their position to build a culture of resilience within the business and emphasize how important agility is. But kind of to echo David in particular, that's not necessarily possible for them unless the supply chain executives have really taken the time to translate what they do into a C language, so a CFO can kind of understand what the value that is created for the entire business through investments in supply chain and making it more resilient. And then kind of at the supply chain executive level, I think following kind of Anders' trail, you're looking at things like being able to diversify your suppliers across geographical regions, build a number of suppliers. Collaboration has come up already, partnerships, being able to share data and information, coordinating logistics to build that kind of stronger relationship with your customers and partners. I know adding redundancy to the supply chain, having backup suppliers, inventory buffers is something that comes up all the time. And then backup transportation, alternative transportation options. I think if a supply chain executive is looking at those things, then they're also then naturally looking at kind of what software is available to facilitate those. And I guess we're in a very fortunate situation kind of in terms of the speed at which technology is developing at the minute. So that things around data analytics, working with machine learning and AI to provide predictive analytics helps provide some of that information and drill into that to mitigate risk or build that resilience. So I think those are some of the areas that from a software perspective, using those new technologies in hand with everything that we've talked about around the supplier base, the partnerships, adding visibility, really trying to reduce your risk and predict what's coming down the line as much as possible.
And I think your answers are, very accurate, the three of you, because we're really talking about, we've got to get rid of siloed systems. We've got to get our data into shape so we can actually use that data. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge as companies try to pivot their supply chain. How do they do that? They need software that's nimble, that can move in the right direction. So let's, in our next question, what technology trends are we seeing in supply chain really now in 2023? And what are we going to be seeing in the future? So let's start with you, Anders.
Thank you, Rick. Well, there's a lot of trends within supply chain. It's a large topic, but let me point out a few of those, or 2 or 3 trends that I see. So first of all, it's supply chain platforms. So, in regards to transparency that we've discussed and data sharing, we've actually seen multiple vendors announcing and releasing new emerging cloud-based supply chain platforms. Products like the Microsoft Supply Chain Center that you will get with Dynamics Supply Chain Management, intelligent order management module within that. So for sharing data, connecting to shippers, etc., to get that complete order view. And then working with partners to do that, like NMB and others, to facilitate that sharing, that complete supply chain view. So platforms, they can support like supply chain digital twins, control towers, things that are very hot topics. And the platforms also support another trend that you mentioned a little bit about being agile. So, we cannot build a solution for what we do not know. So we need a platform that can cater for the unexpected. So that's why we need these kind of supply chain platforms. And then we can build on those with like low-code tools like Power Platform, etc. And integrating it with partner solutions. So then, of course, always using like new innovations. If we're agile and we have a cloud platform, we can innovate with like demand-driven planning to manage your buffers, like Chris was mentioning. So that's one of the trends. Another one I want to mention is that's a very hot topic all over. That's AI and ML. It's everywhere at the moment, and it's also in supply chain. So identify, predict disruptions ahead of time, get the decision support you need in your supply chain. So those are also tools that we're sort of bringing into the command center of Microsoft Supply Chain Center. And you might have heard of the recently announced Dynamics Copilot using AI capabilities. So supply chain platforms, AI, and then finally automation. Because we need to execute on those AI decision predictions. We need to connect to the execution system. We cannot just have an analytics and AI information. We need to act on it as well. So it needs to be, the analytical and the planning system needs to be connected with the execution system. So that's key. So those 3 topics, and we can always throw in sustainability in the end, because it's a very hot topic with the new legislations coming in Europe. So.
Okay, thank you, Anders. David, what would you like to add?
Let me just see, because I definitely echo very loudly what Anders said around platform, right? That's you turn it any which way. The reason why we're practically having these discussions is because there's a platform. And what I'll see more tactically, literally near term 22 to 23, 24, also because of what Chris said, right? We're battening down the hatches, we're getting recession ready. The software investments haven't stopped. They were backed up anyway because of previous disruptions. There's enough out there and people want to do stuff, but it's very much focused on the core. Let's get the basics right. And so, how to say, the minimum set or minimum level of integration, collaboration, sharing, all the stuff which we've been discussing, that is acceptable. Where if you do sign up for less and say, oh, can't I just send an Excel? Can't I just do it by email? Is no longer acceptable. The expectation, hey, that by now you should have a system and we should be able to connect it to another system, whether that's internal, right, or within more my closer near-term footprint, we're talking about NMB, or the actual, massive ecosystem. Even a small company, tier 1, 100 suppliers, tier 2, who knows how many, getting that access is key to everything else, or to a lot of what Anders was describing. AI is only as smart as the data you feed it. Yes, it needs a lot of data to train the algorithm, but then to get the value out of the algorithm, you have to feed it live inputs, and that's what it's going to make its prediction on. And I think, though, the other thing I'm seeing is that the solutions will be rolled out faster. It used to be harder to convince an ecosystem to pull along on a massive rollout. People have understood now at the individual company level that it makes sense to be part of such an ecosystem of extended platform, because you can't run business without it, and you will it's a differentiator, right? It's a differentiator for the market.
And I think you're right, David. People used to think projects had a start and end date, but they really don't, because you pick a platform and it's like going down a corridor, right? You're going to get all these doors start to open, opportunities to implement something new, or build a workflow. It's going to be continuous. And I think pick a platform. We're all picking Microsoft, so pick a platform and invest in that platform, and work with partners like NNB and E2 Open, who are very experienced, who've kind of done this before. So, Chris, what would you like to add?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking as everybody was answering the question, kind of how the definition of the word platform has changed over kind of, I guess, the time I've been working in supply chain. So, if you think of what initially you would have had maybe monolithic software applications where there was an attempt to cram every piece of functionality into a single kind of monster application that then just generally lacked in functionality somewhere along the way, to what was really platforms acting as integration ecosystems. So with potentially like multiple touch point solutions to provide kind of, in inverted commas, centralized visibility and data access. But then the long-term kind of technical debt on the maintenance of that just meant that it very quickly became kind of unwieldy and unusable. And you found that you were still jumping from application to application. You didn't really have a fully connected data flow. But more recently then, and this kind of ties in with where David and Anders were going, certainly kind of, and it's true for kind of E2 Open and Microsoft, I would say, there's this move to preferring platforms or a platform that provides the full range of functionality as needed to a certain level. And then from that departure point, businesses can upgrade specific areas or functions with third-party specialist tools to enhance those as needed, but they can do them at the appropriate time for their business. They're not being faced with an immediate need to go, well, I need something from over there and something from over there and that thing from over here. They're taking those functions, whether it's transportation management, whether it's warehousing, whether it's order management, whether it's demand planning, and they have that functionality to hand, but then can work with that and develop that and enhance that in the way that you kind of alluded to Rick. And I think if I could just sort of do the NMB plug, so to speak, I think that's kind of where we fit into this whole conversation from an ISV perspective. So if you think of kind of the role that ISVs play in the ecosystem, it allows Microsoft to provide that wider range of solutions and capabilities with, say, companies that specialize in supply chain solutions. So bringing that in, so it's industry specific, it looks at the unique challenges and requirements without having a high degree of impact or customization that has to happen to the core product. And obviously from our perspective, we're focused on transportation and parcel and compliance, but that's obviously there are a number of ISVs out there providing similar value into that ecosystem. So you can pick and choose at the appropriate time to kind of give you what's best to your business.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you, panelists, for joining us today. We're going to get some closing remarks from David and Anders. So let's start with you first, David.
So I probably want to dovetail to where Chris was and Anders on the platform side, and especially what was said last, that customers are looking for partners, for platforms like Microsoft, like E2Open, or like NMB that solve multiple solutions, multiple problems, whether it's in business, in technology, IT, at once, and so that I can get more out of my business, my partners, without having to manage multiple contracts and that kind of thing. And for that to work, the said partners, the said companies, the platforms have to be open, right? To work with the other ones. You're never going to find one which is going to do everything. You find of the combinations of the ones which work well with what you already have, where you want to go, and give you that maximum flexibility. So I think that, yep, that's it.
Okay, thank you, David. Anders.
Yeah, I totally agree with David and what Chris was going for here. But so basically, because you do not know the future, you cannot build a product that fits an unknown future. So that's why I also believe in investing in platforms, so where you can be agile and then add functionality or get access to new innovation or add different kind of partner solutions as you need for what happens in the future. So be more agile and open on these platforms. That's my thoughts.
So we're going to have Chris close things off and talk to us a little bit about how NMB can help customers and partners achieve their business goals.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So before I do that, I just wanted to, I guess, drill down to some of the basic reasons or common reasons that we find why customers aren't able to achieve their goals around resilience, diversity, visibility. And I really find that it comes down to four key things, which is with their current issues with or challenges with their current system. One is a lack of scalability. So they end up with doing things manually or in a very linear way. Another is with poor integration or poor integration options between their multiple applications and systems. So they have siloed data and manual tasks rekeying and all that kind of stuff. Also, if they have poor integration or poor communication with their partners and carriers, not only do they lose shipments and inventory, but they also lose customers. Those two things can also then dovetail with a lack of functionality. So in the current systems, if they're working in a very kind of older systems or restricted applications, then they have a lack of functionality that they resolve by going into more manual workarounds, more keying of information, back to David's famous spreadsheets. And all of that means limited visibility. So then you have limited visibility on what you're doing internally, how you're performing, and an inability to react to your issues, trends. If you can't see kind of where a shipment is, for example, then you've got a real problem with customer experience. Just kind of then going on to NMB and kind of just explaining a little bit about where we can help customers and partners that are working with D365 Finance and SC. As I mentioned earlier, we're an ISV, but as we've talked about needing these specialized applications or additional functionality, that's where we fit. That's where we slot into kind of the overall equation. I like to think of us a little bit as like a supply chain exoskeleton for finance and supply chain. So we're providing extended functionality, data insights, but natively integrated to D365 to some of the best of breed supply chain solutions out there. That includes our partnership with E2Open, for example, and other partnerships that we have out there. So that allows us to really bring the knowledge that we have and our partners have on how to do a good transportation management system, parcel management, and restricted party screening. So each of these like a separate module that can be deployed into D365. And from our side, as we're part of Microsoft's ISV Connect program, we can do so, as I say, do it natively into D365 with productized integration. So I guess kind of a long story short, we help Microsoft Dynamics finance and supply chain customers manage and streamline their supply chain operations by connecting providers in the TMS, parcel, and compliance spaces to ensure they have the visibility and control where they need it most.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And again, thank you, panelists, for this outstanding conversation on supply chain resilience. And if you want to get a hold of NMB Solutions, here are the contact numbers, emails, and QR code. So everybody have a great day. We'll be talking to you soon about supply chain resilience.